Welcome to Called to Homeschool with your host, Meg Thomas. I am a mother of 7 with 5 homeschool graduates. Each week, we'll talk about real life homeschool, mindset shifts, and practical tools you can use in your home. Because homeschooling isn't just about school, it's about restoring the family. Hello, welcome back to another episode of Called to Homeschool. Back to answering questions today. And so I'm really excited to dive into this topic of relationships with your teens and rebuilding them. This is great whether or not you have a teen, because if you do have a teen that's struggling, obviously this is perfect. But even if you don't have kids that are that old yet, these are things that you could also be mindful of to avoid so that you don't create a disconnect. So, wherever you are, just young kids or you do have teens, this episode is for you. So, this question comes from Jenna from Indiana, and it's a long question, but I'm going to read it. I'll see if I'll skip over some of it. But she has 3 kids. 14-year-old, 2-year-old, 10-month-old, and she fully plans on homeschooling her 2 youngest kids once they are old enough. But her 14-year-old daughter has always been in public school up until she was 4th grade. She begged and pleaded with me to homeschool her because she didn't like school, and as much as I wanted to, staying home at the time was not an option for me. So then here's the backstory. I had my daughter when I was just a month out of high school. We have basically grown up together, and in addition to working full time, I've been trying to get my own business off the ground since she was 2. And my husband and I have been trying to do everything on our own since she was born. I oftentimes feel so guilty because she was an only child and I didn't have any friends with kids, so she spent a lot of time around busy adults or kids at school who were not very kind to her. I wanted badly to be able to spend more time with her and do more things with her, but I was a workaholic and the goalpost kept moving. When 2020 rolled around and we were locked down, her father and I still had to work full time outside of the home, so she spent her days alone at home doing school online. By the time I was finally able to slow down and spend less time working, time just had flown by and she no longer wanted to spend time with me. Once she turned 11, things started to take a turn. She had found her crowd at school and started liking school, but for the wrong reasons. She started being dishonest with me and making unsavory choices to please her friends. I did what I could at the time to try to teach her that at the end of the day, I will always love her no matter what. But her dishonesty with me is very disappointing and there are consequences to her behavior. Unfortunately, rather than learn these lessons, she got more crafty. When I gave birth to my son, I started to care less and less for modern working conditions for mothers. I lost my job shortly after that and decided that was the sign from God I needed to stay home and focus on my family and growing my own business. Now, here we are 2 years later, and my daughter has, in the last 6 months, started making dangerous choices and finding ways to conceal the truth from me. She isn't doing great in school, but is very vested with extracurricular activities and her social circle. She is a freshman this year, and I've been really thinking about pulling her from school and removing her from social media because I want to basically reform her current mindset of prioritizing her social circle and extracurricular activities over her family that always just want to love and support her. I'm fully aware that at the end of the day that it's up to me to choose what's best for her, and I'm okay making hard choices if it's what's best for her. I don't know if I just, okay, that's how it was worded. But I'm so worried that she will rebel and the result of my efforts with the opposite reaction. Is it too late to make big changes to nurture my daughter's love of home and relationship with her family? If homeschool isn't the answer, how do I remove her from her poor influence at the school? Okay, so first of all, can I just give you a big hug? Like, it sounds like your heart is being pulled in a million directions. And you also talked about some guilt. So we want to just also take time to grieve the past. And before I talk about what to do next, I just want you to look back. And if you are looking back and realizing, I wish I had been more present or I wish I'd spent more time with my daughter, it's okay to feel sad about that. So often we're told to just move on, think positive, but that's not the best way that healing works. You don't have to pretend that you don't have regrets. It's okay to grieve the mom you wish you had been. It's okay to acknowledge that there were seasons when you were distracted, overwhelmed, working, struggling, or simply doing the best you knew how to do. So give yourself permission to feel these emotions instead of pushing them away. And I don't know if you are, but you did talk about guilt. And just as I read it, I can just hear a lot of things about guilt, of explaining like why you weren't super involved with her. But I just want you to not stay there. Guilt does have a purpose. Healthy guilt shines a light on something we want to do differently. So once it has shown us the lesson, it has done its job and we can let it go. The danger is when we keep replaying the past over and over, punishing ourselves for decisions we cannot change. One of the things that I like to teach is that we have to be willing to look honestly at our past without letting it define our future. So you can look back and say, I wish I had done some things differently. And at the very same time, say, I'm going to forgive myself. I was doing the best I could with what I knew at the time. Now I know more and I'm going to do better. So forgiveness isn't pretending the past didn't happen. Forgiveness is choosing not to keep paying for it. Because if you stay trapped in guilt, you are still unavailable to your daughter today, and she doesn't need a mom who's perfect. So, first thing of talking about is just forgiving yourself of the past, right? Because a lot of that question was a lot of that backstory. And so, just really forgiving yourself of where you were at that time and things that you were figuring out. So, this is the second part that you may not have thought that I was going to say, but the power of a sincere apology. So, when you are trying to heal a relationship, one of the most healing things you can do is apologize. Now, this is not because you are taking responsibility for the choices your daughter has made, and not because you're saying, this is all my fault. Those are two very different things. Your daughter is still responsible for her choices. You are responsible for yours. If you look back and realize, I wasn't as involved as I wish I had been, then own that. So you might say something like, I've been thinking a lot lately, and I realized there were times when I wasn't as present as I wish I had been. I'm really sorry. You deserved more from me, and I wish I could go back and do some things differently. Notice what that apology doesn't say. It doesn't say, I'm sorry you're making bad choices. It doesn't say, I'm sorry I ruined your life. And it doesn't say, everything that is happening is my fault. A sincere apology is simply taking ownership of your part. One of the reasons apologies are so powerful is because they lower defenses. When someone feels seen and heard, they're much more willing to reconnect. But here's something important. Don't apologize because you're hoping she is going to immediately change. Apologize because it's the right thing to do. She may not forgive you right away. She may need time. She may not know what to say. She may even be grumpy about it. That's okay. An apology isn't a transaction where you say, I'm sorry, and expect the relationship to be instantly fixed. It is merely an invitation. It's saying, I see where I fell short and I want to do better. So it's one of the things that is so courageous we can do is to own our mistakes without letting them define us. There's incredible strength in being able to say, I wish I had done that differently. Not because you are weak, but because you are secure enough to take responsibility without drowning in shame. And you know what that teaches your daughter? It teaches her that mistakes don't have to end relationships. They can actually become the beginning of healing. All right, so now let's really dive in and talk about your daughter. And I don't know if I'm going to be answering this question in any of the way maybe you were hoping for. But I'm going to be answering it in a way that's actually going to make a difference. And so please hear me out. So I want you to stop focusing on changing your daughter. As I read your question, one thing that really stood out to me is almost every solution you mentioned was about changing your daughter. Pull her out of school, take away social media, change her friends, change her priorities. And while there may come a time and season for those decisions, I don't think that's where I would start. I'd start with a different question. What if the first person to change isn't your daughter? What if it's you? I love the idea of cleaning up your side of the street. Laura Doyle often says that. Instead of spending all your energy trying to get someone else to change, you ask, what is my part? Now, notice I didn't say, what is my fault? Those are two different questions. Fault keeps us stuck in shame. Responsibility gives us the power to act. As I read your story, I noticed something really beautiful. You already identified your part. You said that after your son was born, you realized you wanted to be home more. Looking back, you recognize that you weren't as involved in your daughter's life as you wish you had been. That takes humility. And that's where I find so hopeful. If some of your choices helped create distance, then some of your choices can also rebuild closeness. You can't change yesterday, but you can absolutely change how you show up today. I love the parenting book, Hold On to Your Kids by Gordon Newfield, and he teaches that children are wired to attach. The question isn't whether they're going to attach, the question is to whom. If they don't feel deeply connected to their parents, they'll naturally begin to look for peers for that attachment. That's what he calls peer orientation. As parents, we see this happening and we panic. We see this behavior and immediately try to connect it. We lecture, we tighten the rules, we point out everything they are doing wrong. But Newfield teaches something that completely changes the way you parent. Before behavior comes relationship. If attachment weakens, our influence weakens too. So instead of asking, how do I get my daughter to stop making these choices? Ask yourself, how do I become someone she wants to come back to? I'm going to repeat that because I think anybody struggling with a kid says this. So daughter, son, whoever your kid is. So instead of how do I get my child to stop making these choices, asking yourself honestly, how do I become someone they want to come back to? This question changes everything because now the focus is not on controlling her, it's on rebuilding the relationship. So, what does that actually look like? It means inviting instead of interrogating, listening more than lecturing, looking for opportunities to simply enjoy each other, going and getting ice cream, taking a walk, watch her favorite shows, ask about her friends, her interests, be curious about her world instead of immediately trying to change it. And here's something that is so important that I teach all the time: you have to look for the good and say it. When a relationship becomes strained, it's so easy to only notice what's going wrong. Instead, train your brain to notice what's going right. Did she help someone? Let her know you saw it. Tell her why that was awesome. Did she make a good decision? Point it out. Did she show kindness? Tell her that she is a kind person. You can find so many things that she is doing right and tell her. People tend to grow toward what receives attention. If all your daughter hears is what is wrong with her, she will eventually believe that's all that you see. And at the same time, learn to ignore some of the noise. And that really just means learning to ignore things that don't matter. So that doesn't mean you ignore dangerous behavior and you are the one who gets to define what the dangerous behavior means to you. And it doesn't mean you stop parenting. It means you stop making every interaction about correcting, criticizing, or pointing out what's wrong. If every conversation becomes a lecture, she's going to avoid you. And especially if there's lectures, criticizing, yelling, complaining, she's going to completely avoid you. So yelling might get an immediate compliance, but honestly, with somebody who is rebellious, it often creates a bigger wedge and it builds. It rarely builds long term connection. If she's already pulling away, raising your voice is just going to push her further away. So instead, ask yourself, what does it feel like to be home with me? Is it mostly correction, mostly lectures? Or does she experience warmth, laughter, curiosity, acceptance? Does she feel known? Does she feel enjoyed? One of the most profound truths in Newfield's work is that our children don't stop needing us just because they become teenagers. They may act independent, they may roll their eyes, they may choose friends over family, but underneath all of that is still a child who longs for a safe place to belong. The goal isn't to compete with her friends. The goal is to become her soft place to land. Because when she feels safe, accepted, when she knows she can come to you without any fear or shame or "I told you so," your influence begins to grow again. Not overnight. Trust takes time. Attachment takes time. But every smile, apology, conversation, walk, every moment you simply enjoy being together is another thread in the relationship you are rebuilding. I often tell parents rules may influence behavior for a while, but attachment is what changes hearts. And I think that's the invitation for you. Instead of asking, how do I get my daughter back under control? Ask, how do I get her heart back into the relationship with me? Because those are very different goals. Control may change behavior for a season, but connection changes hearts. That's why I have so much hope for you. It's not too late. Relationships are remarkably resilient. You can't rewrite the past, but you can become the kind of mom your daughter wants to come home to today. So I do want to mention real quick about your daughter with social media. You talked about friends and schools and lots of things, and you can kind of lump this into it. And I'm just going to assume it's a phone. It could be a computer, anything like that. And I just want you to be thoughtful with all of these things because you remember your first priority is building your relationship. And if your daughter already feels disconnected from you, walking in one day and taking away her phone, her friends, her school without any conversation may simply create another wall between the two of you. Or because she's rebellious, honestly, she could just run away. At the same time, I don't think you should ignore what we're learning about smartphones, social media, and some of the things you are learning about. There's a growing body of research suggesting that excessive social media use can affect many teens' mental health, attention, sleep, and overall well being. For some kids, it's simply too much. If your daughter is constantly looking to social media for validation, entertainment, or connection, it's going to be much harder for home to become the place where she feels more connected. That doesn't mean you have to make a decision overnight or very shortly, but I do think it's worth asking yourself, is this phone helping my daughter become the person she wants to be? And you could even do that with the question of, is the school helping my daughter? Are these friends helping my daughter? If the answer is no, you may decide that a smartphone or school or friends aren't the best fit right now. If she does need a phone to communicate with you, a basic phone or flip phone can be a great option. It also allows her to call and text without carrying around an endless stream of distractions in her pocket. With school, where you guys already have a kind of rocky relationship, instead of maybe pulling her all the way out, maybe talking to her about pulling her halfway out, doing some classes in the school, some classes at home. You can also, it's going to be a little tricky with where your relationship is now to just get rid of those friends, especially where she is rebellious, but possibly helping her connect with friends that you would like her to make. So if that is a homeschool co-op, of kind of maybe making a deal, like I'm going to keep you in your extracurricular activities. You can pick so many classes at school. I do want to do some classes with you. I want to have a co-op or something like that, but you need to work with her. If you do make these changes, really I encourage you to approach this from a place of love instead of punishment. Instead of you've lost your phone or friends or school because you can't handle it or you're being a naughty, try something different. I've been thinking a lot about how technology affects all of us, including myself, and I want our home to be a place where we spend more time connecting with each other other than with our screens. I know this may be hard, but I believe it's the best decision for our family. You could even do the same idea with school. I've been thinking a lot about how public school, how for years you wanted to be homeschooled, and there are some good things about this public school, or you really like your friends there. But I want our home to be a place of learning, and I want to spend more time connecting. So, what do you think about doing part-time at home, part-time at public school? So, notice a difference. You're not trying to win a battle, you're leading your family. And if you decide to do something where you are changing things with her instead of just taking things away, remember to replace it with something better, right? So instead of just, I'm going to take your phone away, but you're still on your own, invite her to go on walks with you, bake something together, play games she likes, right? Go out for dessert, watch a show together, talk before bed. Because the goal isn't simply to just remove everything. The goal is to make real life and your relationship more compelling than what she's finding online or outside of your home. So just remember that connection comes before influence. I want to leave you with some final thoughts. As parents, especially when our children are making choices that scare us, our instinct is often to push harder, tighten the rules, lecture more, monitor everything, try to control every decision. And while boundaries have a place, we have to ask ourselves, is what I'm doing bringing my daughter closer to me or pushing her further away? The more rebellious a child becomes, the more tempting it is to increase the pressure. But many times, increasing the pressure only increases the resistance. That's why I believe connection has to come first. When your daughter knows that she is loved, when she knows you're happy to be with her, when she knows she can come to you without expecting another lecture, that's when her heart begins to soften. And when her heart softens, your influence grows. There's a quote from Jeffrey R. Holland that I love that he says, and if those children are unresponsive, maybe you can't teach them yet, but you can love them. And if you love them today, maybe you can teach them tomorrow. I think that's a beautiful reminder. Sometimes we become so focused on changing behavior that we forget the relationship is what gives us influence in the first place. Your daughter never needed a perfect mom. She does need a mom who keeps showing up, who apologizes, who listens, who notices the good, sees the good and tells her, who ignores her little mistakes, right? I know you didn't tell what she's doing that are dangerous choices or whatnot, but we all make mistakes, right? And so it's so tempting to look at other people's faults and ignore our own. And so that's why when we can ignore the things that really just don't matter in the long run and look for the good, it makes such a huge difference. But she needs a mom who's loving her, even when things are hard. And does that mean that you stop being a parent and let her do whatever she wants? Of course not. You still have boundaries and you guide and have expectations, but be careful not to become so controlling that your daughter feels like she has to choose between having a relationship with you and becoming her own person. Your goal is not to control her. Your goal is to build a relationship so strong that over time she begins to trust your heart and your wisdom. At the end of the day, parenting is about relationships because when the relationship is strong, your words carry more weight. Your guidance is more likely to be received, and your daughter is more likely to turn toward you instead of away from you. If you're listening today and wondering, is it too late? I want you to hear this. No. As long as you're trying, it is not too late to start loving differently. You cannot rewrite the past, but you can write a different story beginning today. And that story starts with one simple decision: choose connection. Friends, thank you so much for being here, and I will talk to you next time. Thanks so much for listening to Call to Homeschool. If today's episode was helpful, the best way you can support the show is by leaving a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps more homeschool moms find this work, and I appreciate it so much.